What's up, everybody? My name's Big Cam and I'm your host, and we are back with another Comically Boston breakdown episode. And today we are talking about the season premiere of Peacemaker Season 2 Episode 1, titled The Ties That Grind. And I'm really not sure why that's the title. The first season, all the titles were puns related to something in that episode, but this seems more of like a serious title, and maybe this is more of a serious season. But we open this episode coming off of Peacemaker Season 1, and you know, there's been a bunch of things in between Peacemaker Season 1, because I believe that came back out in like 21, early 22 or something like that. And you know, since then we've gotten Creature Commandos, James Gunn's Superman, and now Peacemaker Season 2 coming off of both of those projects. And we open with previously in the DCU, and James, with this recap for Season 1, is establishing what's canon, what's not canon, and like what's important to remember from Season 1. And you can almost go into Season 2 if you haven't seen Season 1, and you should be alright. You know, maybe just look up a couple of like recap videos online and you should be alright. You shouldn't have to spend the entire 8 hours watching the first season, although I think it's great television and freaking hilarious and craziness, much like what Season 2 is probably going to be like. But James, with this recap for Season 1, is establishing the backstory of Peacemaker, killing his brother and his father being the White Dragon, and his like storage closet that he had in his house is like a very important thing going forward in the Season 2. And you know, he killed his father and his father's like haunting him in his head. All of that's still canon from Season 1, and the 11th Street kids are still canon from Season 1. And then James retcons what's not canon, like the most important thing that wasn't canon from Season 1 is the Justice League showing up at the end of Season 1, and that, you know, back in 21 was tied into the DCEU. Now he retcons this by just simply reshooting just a couple of scenes, and one of them when ADEBYO calls her mother, Amanda Waller, and says, hey, could you send in the Justice League? Now she says, could you send in the Justice Gang? And then instead of Peacemaker making a joke about Aquaman fucking fish, or, you know, a joke about a Green Arrow or somebody he makes, and he says a joke this time, you know, one time I puked all over Green Lantern. I got seasick from flying on a green magic carpet. But the weird thing is, he fucking liked it. So he's trying to like make it like, you know, Aquaman fucks fish. Now he's trying to like make it that Green Lantern has a puke fetish. And then we see the same shot when he's walking out carrying Harcourt out at the end of Season 1. But instead of seeing the shot of the silhouettes of the Justice League, we see silhouettes of the Justice Gang. And he just, you know, has retconned them completely out. And now what we should have seen at the end of Season 1 is this shot of, you know, Mr. Terrific and his little flying chair thing, Superman, Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, and then Supergirl, Millie Alcock Supergirl. So now all James Gunn's DCU people are what's supposed to be canon now for the end of Season 1. And I thought this was brilliant and just quick and a nice easy way to be like, yep, this is fixed, now we're moving on. And it's hilarious because, you know, instead of the same way it was silhouettes in Season 1, and then all of a sudden like they walk past and then they have Aquaman in the Flash, and he's like, I'm sick of that rumor, he fucking, I don't fuck fish, and the Flash is like, yeah you do, you know, like, and it's Ezra Miller and Jason Momoa, and the only reason they were there, I think, was because they were shooting Aquaman 2 in the Flash, so they were able to get those like plates for James Gunn to be able to use. This, they did something similar, where they grabbed plates of all the characters that they were already filming with, and then they stuck them in here. So now it looks like the silhouettes of the Justice Gang are now canon to this universe, but instead of Aquaman and the Flash, now we have Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl talking, and Guy Gardner says to her, screw that guy, you know he tells people I'm a puke freak? And she just like laughs in his face. But man oh man, did Isabella Merced look so good in her goddamn hawk costume. Just the way that the lighting was shining off of her little hawk cowl thing. She friggin' crushes it as Hawkgirl. I love her so much. And then later in the episode when we see her with the, you know, the cowl off and she's kind of just hanging out, Isabella Merced is so freaking gorgeous. I love everything about this woman. And then we officially open up this season 2 with Peacemaker asleep in his bed, and EAGLY starts pecking him to get up because he wants to go out and, you know, go tinkles or something, like whatever an eagle does, maybe stretch his wings. Peacemaker's like, it's too cold outside, we can't go out, and we looks outside and it's snowing, so this must be winter sometime in the DCU. But instead of taking EAGLY outside, he opens up the unfolding, you know, giant storage closet. So he must be living in his father's old house. And he lets EAGLY go fly around the storage container, and we see an alien come out of a separate door, and he's kind of like, what the hell? And he's like, hey, good morning. And he like, we see this alien puts a dead like rat looking thing into an incinerator and burn it, and Peacemaker's like, hey, what's up, how are you, good morning. And the thing just kind of like looks at him and then walks away, and he's like, fuck you then, you crypt keeping looking bitch. And then Peacemaker starts to get mad at EAGLY because he's not listening to his whistle and he won't come back. And, you know, he starts yelling at him like all pet owners do when their animal isn't listening. Like, I was immediately, like, when he was doing this to EAGLY, I was like, yeah, I was thinking about Bodhi. God damn it, Bodhi, get over here, you son of a bitch. And as soon as I walk over there angry, he's like, oh shit, Dad's angry, and he runs away. Like, starts listening, and you're like, see, you're smart. You know how to listen. You're just choosing to be bad. But so Peacemaker is like, where is EAGLY? And he's squawking, trying to get Peacemaker to come over to this door. And it's like, what's this weird door? And he walks up to him. He's like, you dumbass, what are you doing? And then Peacemaker sees a bunch of Peacemaker helmets, a bunch of Beacon of Freedom sitting there that we've never seen. And that, you know, like, this wasn't his area, you know, so he's like, what the fuck is this? So he clearly hasn't ventured out deep into the storage closet very much at all. And then Peacemaker sees that the door has a little key code thing, just like his door, and he tries a code to see if the door opens, and it opens, and he looks in, and it's like a trophy room in this like private library quarters in a mansion. And he's like walking around in a t-shirt and his underoos and, you know, the tighty whities per usual with Peacemaker, and it's like, he's like looking around, he's like, what the fuck is this? And in this room he sees a picture that says the top trio does it again, and it looks like this is another universe. And in this universe, Peacemaker, his father the White Dragon, who wears a blue suit, not a red suit in this universe, and maybe his brother is still alive and another kind of hero, and they like fight crime together as a trio. And it seems like they're saving the day and kicking ass and getting newspaper articles written about them and getting keys to the city. And, you know, Peacemaker's like, what the fuck is this? And, you know, definitely not his universe. And then Peacemaker sees his father Agee standing there in the doorway, and he's like, you okay there, bud? You sleepwalking again? You look like you seen a ghost. And just the way that Agee was talking, it was like, oh god, who is this Agee? It's almost eerily creepy how nice this Agee is compared to the Agee we met in season 1, where he was just the worst human being possible and a Nazi and, you know, a terrible father and such a terrible human being that, like, you know, the thing that made him laugh the hardest was hearing about blood sports torturing. You know what I mean? Like, he was a bad guy. So Peacemaker, you know, sees this guy and he's like, you sleepwalking again? You look like you seen a ghost. And Peacemaker bolts back into the storage closet and he shuts the door behind him and he's like, nah, that can't be my dad. My dad isn't still alive. And, you know, he definitely doesn't seem like his dad because he's way too nice. And then we hear as he's running back into the storage closet, and then it cuts to the season 2 intro music and the intro dance that is set to Oh Lord by Foxy Shazam. And we see this new season 2 intro dance number, and I have the clip here of the entire dance number, and it's freaking awesome. Oh god, I love it so much because it's so unnecessary. Like, they don't need to do this, and they put the little skip button, but like, in my household, we do not skip the Peacemaker intro, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, I've already fallen in love with Foxy's Shazam, and this song has been on my playlist since it got announced a few weeks ago, and now the other, you know, season 1 soundtrack is fully on my playlist, and do you want to taste it? You know, like, the first one rocked way harder, but I think the second one's song is much better, you know, like, oh, Julian, it is a hungry world. You know, and the whole time, every time that I play the song, me and my roommate go to each other and go, who's Julian? You know, like, and I don't know if you guys remember Madagascar, but King Julian, you know, the fucking, oh, Julian, it is a hungry world. You know, like, and then you gotta make that whole theme song, but sung by the little Mort, the King Julian. Mort's King Julian. You know? But this amazing, you know, intro song has this alternate universe, Peacemaker's father and brother and wife or ex-wife, whatever she is, and it's like, what the fuck is going on in this bitch? You know, like, in that intro, you know, May gives some stuff away, like what's going on this season, like, you know, and his suits and his outfits and what's going on there, you know? But the title card itself of Peacemaker in season 1, he had Judo Master up on his shoulder and EAGLY out front, and the lettering was blue. Now the lettering is yellow, and it looks like now there's like, you know, they're either really tired from this dance number and they're all like laying on the ground and EAGLY standing on top of them, or is this like foreshadowing something that like all of these characters die or something, and this is like their fates, and they all die, and EAGLY's just kind of standing on them, like, what happened? Maybe we'll find out in season 3, you know, like, I don't know, but we cut back over after the dance number to Chapter 1, The Ties That Grind, written and directed by James Gunn, and we cut 6 months later after what? After he just saw that universe in the closet, or 6 months after season 1? From what I understand, we are about 3 months after the events of Superman. And we see ADEBYO is picking up Chris from his father's house, which is now his house now, and we find out that Kia and ADEBYO haven't been talking, so maybe that's, you know, a story plot detail, like her and Kia are going to be fighting throughout this season, and, you know, her and her wife aren't a thing anymore, or maybe that actress couldn't come back for season 2, so it's just made ADEBYO now single, and, you know, she's no longer with her wife. But she's like, you know, thinks she's a whole new badass now, so she's willing to just be like, I'm single, she doesn't get me, it's fine. You know, like, and she still seems to be best pals with Peacemaker, and she's, you know, supporting him and whatnot. And we hear that her and HARCOURT hung out yesterday, and HARCOURT's mostly forgiven her for airing out Task Force X's dirty laundry on live TV. But because ADEBYO did that, we'll learn in a little bit later that HARCOURT's life has been a little bit harder now because of that decision making by ADEBYO to kind of screw over her own mother and the rest of the team. But ADEBYO is driving Peacemaker over to a Justice Gang audition, and it's, you know, in a shitty rundown building. As Peacemaker's walking in, he sees this poor woman crying walking out. She's in the white bunny costume, and like she's like the white rabbit or the white bunny or something like that from the comics. And I was just like, oh, this poor woman, why'd she just storm out crying? And we'll find out in a moment. But during the audition, Maxwell Lord, who is played by Sean Gunn, James Gunn's brother, who also plays Weasel and Calendar Man and Kraglin from the Guardians movies that his brother also made. So he's now playing Maxwell Lord, who is the one who owns Lord Tech in the DCU and is like funding the Justice Gang at the moment. And he's doing this audition with Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, and Hawkgirl both sitting next to him. And he's asking questions, and he thinks every time that he asks a question, he's flipping the mic switch to mute. And it's not working properly. So Peacemaker can hear everything that they're saying about him, and they're talking mad shit and being really mean and just like talking amongst themselves and not taking the audition seriously at all. And this is like a big moment for Peacemaker, because like all he's ever dreamed of is being on a team like the Justice Gang, and these guys are just being an asshole. And they say that he sucks cocks and that he's fucking a murderous psychopath and that he sucks. And, you know, Peacemaker finally tells them, like, hey, am I supposed to be able to hear that the mic is broken? You know, like, am I supposed to be able to hear you guys? And he's like, what? You know, like, and then they start, like, arguing amongst themselves. And she's like, it was Guy's fault. And he's like, no, do I look like an AV guy? It was the other guy outside. You know, and, like, they're just, this Justice Gang seems to be a mess, but they also seem to be kind of assholes amongst each other. And this is definitely why that poor woman ran out crying, you know, like. But some of the questions Maxwell Lord was asking Peacemaker in the interview was interesting, you know, like, we're trying to not to murder so much in this Justice Gang, which is hilarious for him to say that, sitting next to Hawk Girl, who we saw murdered Vasil Gurkos in Superman, you know, and he was like, you want to kill me, you're like Superman. She goes, I'm not like Superman. She just kind of let him go. You know, like, did she kill him or did the fall kill him? I don't know. And then Maxwell Lord's like looking at Guy Gardner and he's like, oh my god, how long has this frickin' mic been busted? How long have we been doing this? How many people did we see that they could hear everything we were saying about them? And then he goes, oh my god, how many times did I bring up that poor rabbit girl's camel toe? It must have been 30 times. You know, like, and then it cuts away from them as Peacemaker like storms out of there. And Peacemaker gets in ADEBYO's car and she's like, how'd it go? And he's like, they're fucking assholes. Apparently, I fucking suck dick, and that's a bad trait. And he goes, fuck you, that's a great trait. You know, like in the bisexual Peacemaker king he is. He's like, fucking, sucking dick's not a bad thing. Sucking dick's a great thing, you know? We then see Harcourt gets told from, like, a therapist she has to see that she suffers from toxic masculinity. And he's like, listen, you know, he starts talking to her, and she's like, you're a fucking cunt. You know, and the way she said it, everyone, like, I was listening to it like, whoa! She just called a man therapist in a therapy session, her therapist, a cunt. And then she has to get escorted out of there, and she's like pissed because she really understands that what's going on here is because Waller got fucked by ADEBYO and, you know, is screwed over, and, you know, I don't know if she got like arrested or maybe she's like off the grid or something, but, you know, she clearly, you know, had to shut down Task Force X, and all of her dirty laundry got aired out on live TV by ADEBYO. And because of this, it seems like Waller is screwing over Harcourt and kind of blacklisting her from getting a job anywhere at any of these other, you know, intelligence agencies. So she's like struggling to find another job, and, you know, she's like, I have a freaking great, you know, resume. Why am I not able to get this job? And she's like, you know, now it has on her record that she worked for Waller type of shit, plus now Waller's like behind the scenes fucking with her, so she's like, you know, really pissed. And she goes out to her car and starts beating up her dashboard. We just see her like, ah! You know, she just like punches her dashboard to the point where her knuckles are bloody, you know, and like, I wanted to see the shot of the car screen all cracked and broken. We then see Peacemaker is back at her apartment waiting for her, and he's like, you know, there to see how her interview went and, you know, tell her how his interview went. And they clearly had some type of relationship in the last 6 months since Peacemaker Season 1 and Peacemaker Season 2. And they're walking inside and they're talking about how bad 30 Seconds to Mars is. And then he goes in, gets her ice for her hand. And, you know, it's kind of like this sweet moment. And they both, you know, talking about their interviews and how shit they both were. But Peacemaker brings up that apparently they hooked up on a party boat recently and they were both drunk, and she's like, we were drunk, I don't remember any of it. He's like, I remember a little bit of it. And she's like, it was a fuck up, it's a mistake, it is what it is, we move on. And he's like, a mistake, you fuck up, you know, maybe it's a good thing, you know, like he, you know, is trying to like, maybe you know, we work good together, maybe we're good for each other. But she's like, oh no, not right now, you know, it's a fuck up, it's a mistake, moving, you know, like, and she seems to maybe cut things off with Peacemaker and like isn't here for it, but she also had a rough day, so maybe she'll come back around and be here for Peacemaker later this season. But, you know, in the current moment, I thought they were maybe, you know, good at the by the end of Peacemaker Season 1, you know, he's holding her hand in the hospital and like he's waited for her and like carried her out of there. You know, I thought they would have been, you know, maybe together in a good way at the start of this season, but it seems like maybe things are more complicated than we think. And I thought maybe Peacemaker and Harcourt could have like this deeper love story. And, you know, maybe they still will, but maybe they're just not at a good spot right now. And, you know, maybe within the last 6 months off screen, they hooked up on a party boat and they still kind of are talking, but now it seems like maybe they're on a break and she kind of maybe breaks it off right here. And now they're going to be fighting and not talking so much for the next couple episodes. I hope that, you know, fixes itself and, you know, they actually end up being a couple, because I like Harcourt and Peacemaker together. But Peacemaker is all pissed. He storms out of her place, goes back to his place, and starts smoking bongs and drinking and doing cocaine. And then all of a sudden, there's an orgy in his house. And there's, you know, dicks and guys fucking guys and girls fucking guys with another girl. And then there's 2 guys fucking a girl. And then there's 2 girls fucking and kissing, and then there's a guy and a girl kissing Peacemaker, and it's like bi shit, gay shit, lesbian shit, straight shit. There's all types of shit going on here, and Peacemaker is just liberated with his sexuality, and he's an open cat. What are we gonna say, you know? But Peacemaker then stumbles drunk to the storage closet and starts, you know, typing in the code. So maybe he's drunkenly gonna go over to that other universe again. We then see ECONOMOS is stuck working for Argus, and he's with a detail stuck watching and doing security on Peacemaker's house. And I think he's really watching the closet in like the technology in this house from the White Dragon, not necessarily Peacemaker. But either way, ECONOMOS is stuck on a pretty shit duty. But he's the only one of these team members of the 11th Street Kids that still is working for Argus, right? Like, ADEBYO and Harcourt both don't have jobs. And then we see that Vigilante is still a busboy, and he calls ECONOMOS, and he seems to be calling ECONOMOS every day and just chatting and just fucking, you know, picking his brain. He's like, dude, I know everything about owls. And then he's like, dude, hit me with a fucking owl fact. I know everything about owls. And he's like, trivia me, you know, like he goes, asks him one question, he gets it wrong, and he's like looking at it, he goes, yeah, no, fucking owl eyes are tubular. Fucking, you know, but the conversation they have is just hilarious, because it's like going back and forth about nothing, you know, like it's not really important, but I fucking love that ECONOMOS, Harcourt, ADEBYO, Vigilante, and Peacemaker are all back for this season 2, and like our 11th Street Kids are hopefully going to be reuniting sooner rather than later. We then see 2 new characters to the Peacemaker series, and one of them being Rick Flag Sr., voiced by Frank Grillo, who we've seen in Superman and in Creature Commandos, an animated version, and another character named Sasha Bordeaux, played by Sol Rodriguez. And I don't know who this character is, but apparently Sasha Bordeaux is a pretty big character in the comics. All I know is Sasha Bordeaux, or Sol Rodriguez in real life, is goddamn gorgeous, and I am obsessed. I saw her face and I was like, oh, I have a new crush. Wonderful. I can't wait to see what her character is up about and doing the rest of this series, but just from the interviews I've seen with Sol Rodriguez, she's already, you know, stolen just a little piece of my heart. She hasn't won me over, because I don't know too much about her, but she seems like she's really nice and cool and beautiful, and I have a soft spot for things like that, you know? And Flag and Sasha Bordeaux are calling ECONOMOS and like trying to get the rundown on like what's happening in the Peacemaker house right now. And they're like, is anything weird going on? And he's like, describe weird. And he's like, God, ECONOMOS, why do you always have to be an asshole? And he's like, I mean, he's just fucking, like, you're not seeing what I'm seeing here, man. I'm looking at an orgy. Do you want me to say there's an orgy? And then eventually he just goes, there's an orgy going on. And he's like, an orgy? What is with this cat? And he goes, there's people having sex. He goes, I know what an orgy is. God damn it. Like, fucking Jesus Christ. But Flag seems to not trust ECONOMOS, and he goes, send another agent down there to cover his ass in case he fucks this up. So, you know, Argus is sending maybe Flag, maybe Bordeaux, and they're going to be with ECONOMOS dealing with whatever's going on in that closet and in Peacemaker's house. And, you know, maybe they're not here for Peacemaker, but maybe something's going on with that closet and what's with that technology. Because it kind of reminds me of the portal technology that we just seen in Superman. I think that he even makes a comment about like, it's the same energy as we saw from Lex Luthor's machine in Superman, you know, type of thing. So I'm thinking maybe Agee's technology is way more advanced than we think. Maybe even more advanced than Lex Luthor's. We then see Peacemaker goes back to that other universe, and we see him walking through this mansion, and he's like walking around like, what the fuck? And he walks out the front door and looks up at the stars, and then sees a truck coming down the driveway. And it's a full grown-up version of his brother Keith, and he walks up and hugs him, and they're like looking at him like, what's up, dude? Like, what is wrong with you? I thought you were supposed to be in Bloodhaven. And I actually have a clip of him and his brother coming home, and he's like, you know, witnessing the adult version of his brother for like the first time, because, you know, in his universe, he killed the child version of his brother. So he never got to see what he might look like when he grows up. And, you know, in his universe, he also killed his own father, you know, so he's killed his only family in his universe. You know, we never really hear anything about the mom, but in this universe, we don't see a mom either, but his dad, his brother, and him seem to be in good spirits and actually, you know, really love each other and have a good, healthy family relationship. And Peacemaker's never experienced that. But here's the clip of his brother hugging him and coming home and him being like, what the fuck?
No. You smell like a distillery. You out with the boys?
What are you knuckleheads doing? Christopher, I thought you were in Bloodhaven.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Well, the three amigos are together again. I believe that calls for a celebration.
That's pretty clear thinking for a man of such advanced years.
Why, you
Hey here, old man, before you get hurt.
And he's standing there all confused, like, what? So this universe has another me, and I'm in Bloodhaven? And what's in Bloodhaven? I was like, just from that line alone, it was like, hey, yo, Chris, I thought you were supposed to be in Bloodhaven. And I love the way his father said it, Bloodhaven. And not Bloodhaven, Bloodhaven. You know, in DC Comics, Bloodhaven is a very famous location for the character of Nightwing. So maybe Nightwing, Bloodhaven coming into this season? Probably not, but, you know, with Sacha Bordeaux and the Bloodhaven references, there seems to be a lot of Batman references going forward. So maybe that's what James Gunn's really building towards here, is establishing his Batman in the DC universe. And maybe it's Pattinson, maybe it's not. And we see that our version of Peacemaker goes in and experiences what it's like to have his brother Keith never dead, and toasting to him, and his father and him all having drinks. And it's like this beautiful moment, and like, you know, they're like, half as fun without you, buddy, you know, and like they toast to him, and it's like, what the hell? And Peacemaker's sitting there like, you know, and he's just being real quiet, just kind of listening to his brother and his father kind of like chumming it up and like, you know, reminiscing over memories of the three of them, you know, saving lives, kicking ass together type of shit. And it's like, he's like, I never had any of this. Like, what the fuck? We then see Harcourt over at a bar, and much like season 1, she'd go to a bar by herself, and then some creepy weirdos would hit on her, and she maybe would beat them up. This seems to be exactly her plan here. She goes to the bar, she barely even gets a beer, doesn't even really sip it, and a couple of guys come up to her and like, you know, starts talking to her, and she, you know, beats one of the guys' asses. The guy behind her, I think, is just trying to like, hey, take it easy here. You know, he's not even necessarily trying to fight her or anything, and she punches him, so now they like start going at it, and she's like beating the hell out of these guys in this bar. You know, clearly letting off some stress and anger and, you know, releasing some steam. But, you know, she's won on a bunch of grown biker guys in this bar. And, you know, maybe she just wanted some practice, or maybe she was just angry and wanted to let some of that anger out. Or maybe she just wants to get killed and beat up, you know, who knows. But she's, you know, taking out stress and beating on this guy until some of the other guys at the bar, like, knock her off and start kicking her unconscious. And then they start, like, stomping her out on the ground. And they throw her up out of the bar and throw her onto the street. And she's laying on the ground staring up at the moon, with blood coming out of her mouth. And I was like, that's a terrible shot. But poor Harcourt here, she's just like bleeding from her nose, her mouth, maybe her eyebrows cut, and it's bleeding down her face, and she's just covered in blood. And yeah, I don't know why we keep getting Jennifer Holland covered in blood staring up at the moon, and we're like, is she dead? No? Alright, well, maybe she just enjoys being covered in blood and beat up. We then cut back to Peacemaker, and he's gotten to experience a night of drinking with his brother and father, and they're nice to him, and they say, I love you, and they're like saying goodnight to him, and he's like, what the fuck? And he's sitting there, and he has a good cry as they leave, and he's like, wow, this is what my life could have been like, but I killed my fucking brother when I was a kid because my father like made us fight, and for 40 years he was dealing with this asshole father before killing him, you know, so he's like, I could have, you know, had a nice life and loving, and, you know, and his father like is touching his earlobe. I love you too, buddy. And he like touches his earlobe as he's walking out. And this little like loving gesture, Peacemaker's face is like, you know, like, I've never felt this. This is like, you know, more emotion and love than he's ever felt in his entire life type of shit. We then see ECONOMOS goes to ADEBYO to ask her advice on Peacemaker, but he's not really there for advice, and she finds out that he's really just asking her to go talk to Peacemaker for him. We then see Peacemaker goes and looks at his room in this mansion. He's like, well, you know, I've had a whole night in this mansion with the boys, and my Peacemaker self from this universe hasn't come back. Might as well go look at his room and see what that's like, and see how different he is from this universe. Not all that different, because he walked into this room in the mansion, and it's got a Hanoi Rocks poster on the wall, it's got a Scorpions poster on the wall, but the biggest difference, he's got a ex-wife that Keith was referring to, and he goes, yeah, maybe you should go try it again. You know, she's with the Jarhead now, but, you know, I think it should be alright. And it's like, okay, wait, so who's the Jarhead that she's now with? But we see a picture on the mantle of, like, the fireplace of Peacemaker and HARCOURT happy. So this must have been his wife in this other universe. So in this other universe, HARCOURT and him are happily together. He's got a sweet, loving family. He's a hero. You know, all the things that he wants. But then he has to, like, you know, go back to his universe where he's a shitbag, scumbag, not getting the job with the fucking Justice Gang and, you know, not being a great guy. But as he's looking at the picture of HARCOURT and he's standing in this other Peacemaker's room, the actual Peacemaker from this universe comes back and he says, who the fuck are you? And Peacemaker like fights him and makes a run for it, and he runs into the closet universe. But he gets 2 magic stars, which is like the helmet that this universe Peacemaker is wearing, and he goes, activate magic stars! And the stars come out like 2 spurs of a like, you know, on the back of cowboy boots, and they come out and they start like stabbing Peacemaker in the back and cutting him up. And this Peacemaker we see has a jetpack. It is fighting the other Peacemaker. So we get a little John Cena versus John Cena action here. And, you know, as they're like fighting and they're tussling, Peacemaker, our Peacemaker, hits the jetpack button on his backpack, and he goes straight up in the air and kind of gets impaled by a sharp, like, chandelier or whatever is on the ceiling, and then he falls back onto the ground in, like, this dead body, and the other Peacemaker is, like, holding himself dead now on the floor of this like storage container closet area, and he's like, you know, holding himself dead as like he's dying, and he looks at his other Peacemaker self, and he's like, wait, I just got killed by myself? What is happening here? So now the good hero version of Peacemaker just got murdered by the shitty version of Peacemaker from our universe, the one that we know, you know? And Peacemaker's just left holding his own dead body, looking around the closet like, is anyone there to help him? And also, like, did anyone see this? And the credits roll on episode 1, and I was like, wow, what a crazy ending to episode 1, heading us into episode 2. But if you don't know, every single Peacemaker has a post-credit scene, and not always like an important post-credit scene, like this isn't important for the next episode, but it's still a little extra something from this episode included at the end. And this post-credit scene is Peacemaker and HARCOURT walking into her apartment and shitting all over 30 Seconds to Mars, and she's saying, you can't be looping the spin doctors in with 30 Seconds to Mars. And Peacemaker is like, anybody's better than 30 Seconds to Mars. And then we see in the trailer for next week, it seems like Peacemaker, our Peacemaker, has given up on himself in redemption in this other universe he thinks is impossible. So he's just gonna go live out being a good guy in this other good universe. And it seems like the 11th Street Kids from our universe are going to try and save Chris and bring him back to their universe. So maybe they're going to be going from this one dimension to the other dimension, and all this type of weird shit's going to be going on, and they're trying to make our Peacemaker come back, and he's maybe going to try and be living as a good guy in this other universe and maybe fucking it up, or maybe just, you know, enjoying his life with HARCOURT there, when he could be trying to make a better life here, but, you know, it's trying to take the easy way out. And then there's like an extra HBO at the end of the credits, after the trailer for next week and after the post-credit scene, after everything. There's like this featurette of like how they made the episode, and James Gunn's talking more about the season, about the episode, and where we could be going forward. And John Cena's talking about shit, and they have all the cast and crew and on set, and they're like talking, you know, giving like a featurette about the episode. And James Gunn, in this little featurette in the post-credits, apparently the storage closet that we're in has 99 doors that connect to 99 different universes. And James Gunn also points out that Peacemaker has now killed his brother and father from his universe and his own self from another universe. And it seems like our Peacemaker, death, keeps following this guy around. And, you know, I don't know what this says, but it definitely is interesting that, like, we just went to one door, and this was a different universe where Peacemaker's a good guy. You're telling me there could be 98 other possible universes with 98 other possible Peacemakers out there that could be worse than the one that we currently have? Or maybe they're also good guys, who knows? But it also just leaves the possibility open for us to explore 99 universes in the DC universe, and how it just keeps getting bigger and bigger by the second, you know? And he's only done, you know, Creature Commandos, the Penguin, which wasn't even really him, but like technically in the DCU, and, you know, which was also technically then put the Batman, but that's also kind of Elseworld stuff. But like for James Gunn's confirmed DCU, it's like starts with the Suicide Squad, Creature Commandos, Superman, and now Peacemaker Season 2. At the beginning of this episode, we explained how James Gunn has retconned that, so now Peacemaker is officially in the new James Gunn DCU, and craziness will ensue going into the second episode, because he killed himself, and then he's going to have to try and clean up that body next episode. And he's not just cleaning up a body. It's going to be a little bit different when you're cleaning up yourself. Like, you're like, hey, I killed me, and now I have to bury me. You know, like, it's not just like I killed a person, and now I have to bury that person. You're killed yourself, and you're burying you. You know, like, bah. Maybe he's not fully dead. No, he's definitely dead. He looked like he got impaled by a spike through the middle of his chest. Like, you know, like, terrible. But comment below your thoughts on Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 1, and what do you think is going to happen going forward from here? Do you like how James Gunn retconned the DCEU and then making it now his DCU? I do kind of like it quite a bit, and I can't wait to see more of this. I really can't. You know, the rest of this season is going to be a lot of fun. We got 7 more weeks after this and 7 more episodes before Peacemaker Season 2 ends. So make sure you guys hit that bell so you don't miss future Peacemaker content over the next 7 weeks as that comes out, and you'll get the notifications when those videos drop. And make sure you guys hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and comment down below if you would like to support the channel, and if you want to talk more Peacemaker with me on my other social medias. Links for those down in the description below. Thank you guys so much for coming on by. Once again, my name's Big Cam, and I will see you beautiful people in the next video. Peace.